Hello everyone, have a nice evening. Enjoy a good ghost story with the gentle sound of rain from BLACKRIDGE Stories, and sleep well. If you find these stories interesting, please subscribe and comment for me. Thank you very much everyone, and now, without keeping you waiting any longer, let's go to part one of the story. The lights still flicker. There was something deeply wrong about the silence around Oyster Creek Nuclear Power Plant. It wasn't just the absence of people, though it had been decommissioned for nearly a decade, but the way the wind seemed to hush itself near the perimeter fence, the way the surrounding pine trees leaned ever so slightly away from the facility, as if repelled by something no one could see. Marcus Trent adjusted his hard hat and flipped through the work order on his clipboard. Routine structural inspection. It read, commissioned by a private firm that had bought the land. A future redevelopment project, luxury housing maybe. They always wanted to turn old scars into something glamorous. He wasn't alone. Olivia Chun, a quiet but sharp engineer from the city, walked beside him, boots crunching the gravel path that led up to the South Reactor building. Behind them, the rest of the inspection crew unloaded sensors, portable lights, and safety gear. The sun was already beginning to dip beneath the tree line. Marcus glanced up at the looming gray facade. The building rose like a tombstone against the red-gold sky, its windows dark, most of them shattered or sealed. He cleared his throat. "You hear the stories?" he asked Olivia. She gave him a sidelong glance. "Which ones?" He smiled, though there was no humor in it. "The shadow people, the voices, lights turning on by themselves. You know, ghost stuff." Olivia shrugged. "Every abandoned building has stories. Especially nuclear plants. People like to imagine radiation creates ghosts." "Maybe it does," Marcus said under his breath. They stepped through the rusted side door. The air changed immediately, cooler, heavier, with the scent of metal and mold. Their flashlights flicked on, beams slicing through thick dust motes. Silence settled like a blanket. Even their footsteps seemed absorbed by the concrete. The main control room was just down the corridor. As they walked, Marcus felt a vibration, faint, almost imperceptible beneath his boots. He paused. "Did you feel that?" Olivia stopped too. "What?" "Like a hum. Just now." She tilted her head. "Maybe the wind." But Marcus wasn't sure. It wasn't wind. It was something deeper, like the building itself had exhaled. They reached the control room. It looked like the bridge of an old spaceship. Rows of dials and dead monitors. Some screens were shattered. Others were coated in dust thick enough to write on. Marcus shone his light over a faded calendar still pinned to the wall. October 2009. A sudden static pop from Marcus's radio made both of them jump. He fumbled to unclip it. "Base, this is Trent. You copy." Only static replied. He tried again. "Base, come in." Nothing. Olivia tapped hers. "Mine's dead too." They exchanged uneasy glances. "Interference," she offered. "Maybe." But Marcus remembered testing the radios earlier outside. Full bars. No issue. As they stepped deeper into the room, Marcus noticed something strange on one of the control panels. A series of toggle switches were flipped to on. He frowned. These shouldn't be like this. What do they do? Nothing anymore. Power's off across the whole plant. They're just for show now. He reached out to flip one off. The lights overhead flickered. Both froze. "Did you see?" "I saw it," Olivia said, suddenly alert. "You said there's no power?" "There isn't." Another flicker, this time brighter. Then nothing. A deep, low groan echoed through the building. Not metal settling. Not the wind. Something deeper. Closer. Marcus stepped back. "Okay, that's..." A loud clang cut him off. From somewhere in the corridor they had come from. Then another. It sounded like footsteps. Heavy ones. But wrong dragging. As if something large and metallic was moving across the floor. Olivia turned to the door. Flashlight trembling slightly in her grip. "There's someone in here." Marcus's skin prickled with goosebumps. "This place is locked tight. You saw the fence. The security. Then who's walking around?" They backed into the control room as the noise grew closer. Then it stopped. Silence. Then, click. A single red light on the far wall came to life. One of the monitoring indicators. Marcus stared. That's impossible. The panel under began to tick. A slow, steady count climbing upwards. Reactor temperature. There's no active core, Olivia said, voice barely above a whisper. I know. Then what the hell is it measuring? Marcus couldn't answer. His gaze locked on the readout, climbing slowly, steadily, and then, from the far corner of the room, a voice. Male, whispering. Emergency protocol failure to contain, breach detected. The words were fragmented, choppy, like a transmission half heard through water. Marcus turned his flashlight toward the source. There was nothing there, but the whisper came again, this time behind them. Closer. Fatal exposure, core breach. Where is that coming from? Olivia hissed. I don't know. Suddenly, all the lights in the control room flared, not flickered, flared, a painful, blinding white. Marcus cried out, shielding his eyes. Olivia dropped to her knees. And then, as quickly as they came on, the lights cut out. Darkness. Absolute. Marcus's flashlight was dead. Olivia's too. The radios crackled again, but the sounds coming through weren't voices. They were screams. Distant. Echoing. Like from a tunnel that never ended. Then, just outside the control room doorway, a shape. A silhouette. Humanoid but warped. Its proportions too long. Head cocked at an unnatural angle. It stood there, watching. Marcus couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The figure moved. Slow. Gliding. And as it did, a horrible smell filled the air. Burnt plastic, ozone, and something worse like cooked meat. Olivia grabbed his arm, whispering, We need to leave. Now. They turned and ran, boots slamming against concrete. The corridors had changed. They seemed longer. New doorways where there weren't any before. And behind them, footsteps. Not just one. Several. Coming faster. Shadows flickered along the walls, dozens of them. Some tall, others crawling. All moving toward them. They rounded a corner and saw the side exit. They came in through, wide open. Without a word, they bolted through it, emerging into the cold night air. The trees still leaned away. The wind still didn't blow. And behind them, in the dead concrete structure, the red warning light glowed steadily on the control panel, even though the plant had no power. Let's get to part 2 of the story, The Girl in the Window. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus and Olivia fled Oyster Creek. Neither of them could explain what they had seen. And worse, no one believed them. Their report was buried under equipment malfunction and structural echo phenomena. But they knew better. Something was awake in that plant. Something old and watching. Marcus hadn't been sleeping well. He kept seeing that silhouette in his dreams. The flickering lights, the whispering static. And always, just before waking, he would hear a single phrase, so clear it rang in his skull. Find a girl. That's what led them to Cape May. It started with a photograph Olivia found tucked behind a fused box in the control room. A black and white image, water-damaged but legible. A young woman in an old-fashioned dress, standing in front of a Victorian house. On the back, in smudged pencil, Tangier House, 1954. LR. It shouldn't have been there. No connection to the plant. No logical reason for it to exist at all. But Olivia, compelled by something she couldn't explain, had traced a house to Cape May. The Tangier House still stood, an elegant yet decaying Victorian structure on Columbia Avenue, flanked by thick trees and shrouded in rumors. They said the house was cursed, that a woman, Lenora Reese, daughter of a wealthy shipping magnate, died there in the 1950s, fell from a third-story window during a thunderstorm. Some said she jumped. Others whispered she was pushed. But all agreed her ghost remained. Marcus didn't believe in curses. He believed in patterns. And this house, this woman, something about her, was linked to Oyster Creek. He could feel it in his bones. The air was colder than it should have been for mid-autumn. Olivia pulled her coat tighter as they stood in front of the house. Its red paint had faded to a sickly rust color. The porch creaked with every wind gust, and a single window on the top floor remained unshuttered. That was where she died. She's still up there. Marcus said. Olivia glanced at him. You sound certain. I've seen her. In my dreams. They stepped onto the porch. The front door wasn't locked. Inside, the Tangier house smelled of damp wood and decaying roses. Furniture remained untouched, though dust blanketed everything. Paint peeled from the ceiling in delicate curls. A chandelier hung low in the foyer, swaying gently without breeze. Olivia moved toward the staircase, her flashlight catching framed portraits along the wall. One showed the same woman from the photograph, Lenora, eyes soft but distant, mouth tilted in the hint of a smile. She was beautiful, Olivia murmured. Trapped, Marcus replied, like the voices at the plant. They climbed the stairs slowly, every step groaning beneath their weight. On the third floor, a hallway narrowed. Faded wallpaper curled in strips, revealing water-stained plaster beneath. At the far end was the room with the open window. The door creaked as Marcus pushed it open. Dust motes danced in the pale light. The bed remained four-poster, with torn lace curtains. A writing desk stood beside the window. On it a small, antique mirror, cracked down the center. Then they saw it. Etched into the mirror, nearly invisible except in the right angle of light, were letters, backward, as if scrawled from the inside. Breach. Olivia touched the glass. It pulsed beneath her fingers, warm. Marcus felt it too. A tremor beneath the floorboards, like the hum at the nuclear plant. It's connected, he whispered. Then a sound behind them. A soft footstep. They turned. No one, but in the hallway, a faint giggle. Hi, girlish. Not joyful. Mocking. Olivia took a step back. Did you? Yes. The lights flickered. Then from the mirror, a face. Not their reflections. A young woman, pale and wide-eyed, her mouth moving as if screaming, but no sound came through. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, sending shards across the floor. At the same moment, the window slammed shut with a force that shook the entire room. Marcus grabbed Olivia's hand. We're not alone. The temperature dropped instantly. Their breath fogged in the air. Then, from down the hallway, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Olivia whispered, "She's coming." A shape appeared at the end of the hall, barely visible. A girl in a white gown, her hair soaked as though from rain, face obscured. She stepped forward, and as she did, the walls began to bleed, not with blood, but with static. Thin lines of shimmering interference crawled down the wallpaper like corrupted videotape. Lights surged and buzzed. The house groaned as if alive. Marcus backed toward the stairwell, but the hallway stretched further, impossibly long. No, he muttered. This isn't real. This isn't real. But Olivia clutched his arm and pointed. Where the girl had stood, now there was a door. One that hadn't been there before. It was metallic, industrial, marked with a stenciled warning. Oyster Creek Control Room. Maintenance access only. Olivia gasped. It's the plant. No, it's a rift. Between here and there. He stepped forward, mesmerized. And then he heard it again. Clearly this time. Not in his head. Not in the wind. Find a girl. The door creaked open on its own. Inside was darkness. But Marcus knew they had to go. He turned to Olivia. If she's trapped between here and that place, maybe we can pull her out. Or get pulled in. He nodded grimly. It's a risk. She hesitated, then followed. As they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them, and the Tangier house stood silent once more. But in the window of the third floor, just for a moment, a young woman watched the street below, lips parted in a soundless cry, eyes pleading, then vanished. Let's move on to part 3 of the story. The woman on the red bridge. The cold was immediate. When Marcus and Olivia stepped through the metallic door in the Tangier house, they expected darkness, perhaps a return to the abandoned control room of Oyster Creek. Instead, they found themselves standing in an open field beneath a charcoal sky. No stars, no wind, just silence, and in the distance, stretched across a blackened river, loomed a long, narrow red bridge. The structure looked impossibly old, covered in rust and ivy, yet held together by some unseen force. Atop one of its arches, a single dim streetlight flickered like a dying eye. Marcus exhaled. Where are we? Olivia scanned the surroundings, her voice hushed. This isn't the plant, or the house. She turned in place. The door they just passed through had vanished. No more Tangier house. No more mirror. Just open field and the bridge. They were somewhere else now. Someplace between. As they approached the bridge, the temperature dropped further. Their breath swirled like smoke. The air felt dense, almost gelatinous, as if they were walking through the residue of forgotten dreams. Marcus stopped at the edge of the bridge. There were no cars, no traffic, just the bridge itself, stretching into a fog, so thick it looked painted on. This is the Red Bridge, he murmured. Salem. Olivia frowned. You've heard of it. Old urban legend. Woman in white, said to appear in the middle of the bridge at night, arms outstretched. Drivers crash. Some vanish. They say she died here, but no one knows when. Or how. Why would this be connected to Oyster Creek? To Lenora? Marcus's jaw clenched. I don't know, but it's not random. We're following something's path. A gust of wind swept across the bridge, unnatural and wet, like air sucked from underwater lungs. Then a low hum, familiar, like the reactor core at Oyster Creek, like the whisper behind Lenora's mirror. The hum of a breach. Olivia pointed. Look, halfway across the bridge stood a woman. Her dress was white, soaked as if she'd been pulled from the river. Her hair draped across her face. She didn't move. Marcus took a cautious step forward. Lenora. The woman slowly raised her head. It wasn't Lenora. This face was older, worn, and yet wrong, as if someone had taken a memory and stretched it into a mask. Her mouth opened, wide, too wide. From it came a sound not meant for ears, a screech layered with 1,000 whispers, a tone that bypassed the mind and stabbed straight into the bones. Marcus fell to his knees. Olivia screamed, clutching her ears. Then the woman vanished, and the fog rushed forward, like a tidal wave of static. It slammed into them, pulling them backward into a different place. They were in a car, driving fast. Rain slammed against the windshield. Wipers squealed in protest. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, Olivia next to him, gasping for breath. What happened? She stammered. I don't know, he said, eyes wide. But we're on the bridge. And indeed they were. Outside, headlights illuminated red steel beams, flashing past. The river below churned in violent swells. Then, just ahead, the woman, standing in the middle of the lane, arms outstretched. Marcus swerved hard. The car spun, tire screeching, slammed against the railing, and came to a stop, half hanging over the edge. Steam hissed from the hood. Rain poured in through the shattered windshield. They were alive. Barely, but something else had changed. When Marcus looked in the rearview mirror, he saw not the bridge, but the control room of Oyster Creek. The reactor, the core, glowing blue, the panels blinking in impossible patterns. And Lenora, standing by the console, her face solemn, one hand raised as if in farewell. Olivia turned, eyes wide with realization. It's all one place. The plant, the house, the bridge. Marcus said, breath ragged. Their intersections. Of what? Realities. Or timelines. Maybe trauma. Maybe souls. I don't know. But in the mirror, Lenora mouthed something. She must not cross. Marcus stared. She who? Behind them a scream. They turned in unison. The woman in white was no longer standing. She was floating, hair splayed in the air, mouth open. Her eyes were two burning red orbs. She lunged. Marcus grabbed Olivia and kicked the door open. They tumbled out into the rain, rolled onto the slick metal floor of the bridge. Behind them, the car exploded into shards of static, disintegrating like corrupted VHS tape. The woman shrieked again and vanished in a burst of light. Silence. And then Lenora stood before them, not flickering, not ghostly, real. She knelt beside them, her voice clear and warm. You're not supposed to be here. Marcus coughed. Where is here? Lenora looked toward the center of the bridge, a fault line, between memory and consequence. Olivia whispered, What's the woman? Lenora hesitated. She's what happens when pain echoes too long without answer. She was me once, before I remembered who I was. She looked at Marcus. You helped me do that. At the house. Through the mirror. Marcus sat up. Can we help her? Lenora shook her head sadly. No, the bridge is hers now. But she's hurting people, Olivia said. Lenora's eyes glistened. She is people. All the lost ones. All the drowned. Every forgotten tragedy needs a home. The bridge gave her one. A pause. Then Marcus asked, why bring us here? You need to warn the others. The breaches are growing. Oyster Creek wasn't the first. It won't be the last. She held out her hands. In one palm, a piece of broken mirror. In the other, a photo of the bridge burning. Take this. When the static returns, you'll know what to do. Then everything went white. They awoke at dawn, on the side of a rural road near Salem. No bridge in sight. No fog. Just two people soaked to the bone, clutching a broken mirror and a photo that hadn't existed yesterday. On the back, in scrawled handwriting, stop the merging, find the door within. Marcus looked at Olivia. She nodded. We keep going. Let's get to part 4 of the story, the laughter beneath the ivy. It had been 3 days since Marcus and Olivia woke up beside the road near Salem, gripping a mirror shard and a scorched photograph of the Red Bridge. 3 days of silence from Lenora. 3 days of dreams fractured, echoing with static. On the 4th day, the mirror shard began to vibrate in Marcus's pocket. Not a tremor, but a pull, like a compass needle seeking north. And that's what led them to Princeton Cemetery. It was dusk when they arrived. The cemetery looked deceptively ordinary. Wrought iron gates, ivy-covered headstones, winding stone paths. Birds chirped. Trees rustled. Nothing screamed breach. Yet the shard in Marcus's hand throbbed like a heartbeat. This is the place, he whispered. Olivia nodded. Feels too quiet. They stepped inside. The gates groaned behind them, though neither had touched them. The air changed instantly. The birds stopped. The wind stilled. The color seemed to dull, washed in a pale blue tint, like an old film reel. They wandered deeper into the graveyard. The names on the stones became harder to read, as though being forgotten in real time. Moss grew faster than it should, stretching across letters as they walked past. Then they heard it. Laughter. Soft. Innocent. Children's laughter. Marcus froze. Tell me you hear that. Olivia nodded, pale. It's behind us. They turned. No one there. But something else had changed. The cemetery had shifted. The layout was different. Statues stood where none had been. A path had vanished. And overhead, the sky now glowed a sickly violet. Marcus gripped a mirror shard. We've crossed again. Into what? Before he could answer, a ball rolled toward them from between the gravestones. Old leather and cracked with age. It stopped at Marcus's feet. Then came the voices. Whispers. Rhymes. Songs half remembered from childhood. Sung in reverse. And the shadows. They flickered between the graves, small, fast-moving, childlike. Their movements were playful. Curious. But something in them felt wrong. Like puppets jerking on tangled strings. Marcus bent down and picked up the ball. The leather peeled back like skin, revealing an eye. It blinked. He dropped it. The ground beneath them trembled, and from the far end of the cemetery, a merry-go-round began to turn. No lights, no music, just the creak-creak-creak of rusted metal. Olivia whispered, "That's not real. It can't be." But they both knew by now. Real had rules, and here there were none. They approached the carousel. Upon its platform sat children, unmoving, dressed in vintage clothes, faces porcelain white, eyes empty. In unison, they turned to look at Marcus and Olivia. Then they smiled. A voice echoed across the cemetery. A child's voice, but distorted. "Play with us. Stay with us. You left us." Marcus stepped back. No, I've never." But then he remembered. A dream. A memory. A field trip to Princeton, years ago. The class visited the cemetery. He'd wandered off. Found a small mausoleum. Inside, he'd heard laughter and fled, terrified. He never spoke of it, but something had noticed him that day, and now it remembered. One of the carousel children stood up and floated toward him. Her face cracked as she smiled wider. We waited. Behind her, the other children rose too. Some crawled, some hovered. Their mouths whispered in unison. He came back. He came back. He belongs. Olivia pulled Marcus's arm. We need to leave. Now. But the paths had vanished. Trees bent over the exits. Ivy twisted across the graves like veins. There was no escape. Marcus felt a burning in his palm. The mirror shard glowed blue. He held it up, and for a moment, the children recoiled, their forms flickering like TV signals cutting out. But it wasn't enough. The air split with laughter, louder, harsher. From everywhere, the carousel spun faster. Then Lenora appeared. No warning, no flash, just there. She stood between Marcus and the approaching children, eyes glowing faintly, her presence stabilizing the space. "Don't look at them," she said sharply. "Look at me." Marcus obeyed. "They feed on unfinished memory," Lenora said. "The ones who were never mourned. Forgotten children, lost in time. But this place isn't just haunted, it's a fragment." Olivia blinked. "Of what?" Lenora turned to her. "Of the breach. Each location we visited, they're pieces, refractions of a core reality trying to surface." She looked down at Marcus's mirror shard. "You're close." "To what?" "To the door within." Marcus stepped forward. "You told us to find it." Lenora nodded. "It exists beneath the cemetery, buried in a vault that predates the town itself. But it's guarded." "By what?" Olivia asked. Lenora looked at the children. "By them. Or rather, by what they've become." Suddenly, the ground cracked. From beneath the carousel, black smoke erupted, forming a towering shape, part child, part shadow, stitched together by voices and teeth. It shrieked. Door closed. "Soul, stay." Lenora reached into her coat and drew out something new. A sliver of metal shaped like a key. She turned to Marcus. "You must carry it now." He hesitated. "What does it open?" Her voice lowered. "Everything." She pressed the key into his hand. The moment he touched it, images exploded in his mind. Cities upside down, oceans of static, a throne of wires. Then silence. Lenora smiled softly. "The next place will call to you." The carousel burst into flame. The children screamed, but not in pain. In rage, Lenora snapped her fingers, and the world collapsed. Marcus and Olivia woke in the backseat of their car. It was morning. The cemetery was gone. In its place, an open field. Marcus opened his hand. The key was still there, and the mirror shard had cracked again, forming the shape of a door. Let's get to part 5 of the story, Roots of the Forgotten. They didn't plan to return to New Jersey, but the key, now humming faintly with the pulsing warmth, was pointing northwest, and every time Marcus closed his eyes, he saw it. A tree, blackened and skeletal against a white sky. Its branches twisted like veins. Its roots hungry. Devil's tree. Locals whispered about it. How snow never stuck to the ground around it. How no birds perched on its limbs. How those who mocked it never came back. Olivia parked the car along a gravel path, half swallowed by weeds. It was dusk again. Always dusk when they got close to a site. The air here was denser, like breathing through gauze. No signs. No trails. Olivia muttered. Marcus nodded, clutching the cracked mirror shard and the silver key. It doesn't want to be found, but it knows we're here. They walked in silence. The forest grew darker as they moved, unnaturally so. Light itself seemed reluctant to linger. Then, suddenly, the trees parted, and there it was, the Devil's Tree. It stood in a clearing barren of grass, the soil dry and cracked around its roots. The bark was pitch black, as if fire had once licked it but never consumed it. Despite no wind, its upper branches swayed slightly. Olivia took a cautious step forward. Why does it feel like it's breathing? Because it was. With each footstep closer, Marcus felt a rhythm beneath his feet, slow, ancient, like a heartbeat echoing through roots deeper than earth. They circled the tree. Symbols had been carved into its trunk, some old and faded, others fresh and bleeding, sapped the color of rust. At its base sat a small stone tablet. The inscription read, "To open the door within, you must feed the root what was taken." Marcus stared at the words. What was taken? Before Olivia could answer, the ground shook violently. A hole opened in front of the tree, gaping like a mouth. Roots, pale and twitching, slithered out like fingers reaching for something. From the forest behind them, whispers began, soft, echoing. Then came the first figure. A woman, gaunt, eyes gone, skin gray. She walked stiffly toward the tree, her head twitching to one side. Then another figure emerged. A man this time, then a child, all disfigured, all hollow-eyed, all shuffling toward the hole like sleepwalkers. Marcus backed away. The missing people, the ones who vanished. They were never taken, Olivia whispered, horrified. They were called back. Lenora's voice echoed suddenly, though she wasn't there. The Devil's Tree is not a prison. It's a beacon, for those the breach rejected. Marcus looked down. The mirror shard was glowing, showing not his reflection, but a tunnel, wooden walls and twisting roots, spiraling downward. The vault, he breathed. He stepped toward the hole. Olivia grabbed his arm. You don't know what's down there. He looked at her. But I think the keyhole is. She didn't argue. They descended. The tunnel walls pulsed like flesh. Roots pressed against them like veins beneath skin. Deeper and deeper they went, past flickering carvings etched into the bark itself. Symbols they'd seen before. On the mirror, on Lenora's notes, on the children's carousel. Then they found the door. It wasn't made of wood or stone, but of interwoven roots, wrapped tightly around a frame of black iron. In the center, keyhole, pulsing like a slow blink. Marcus pulled the silver key from his coat. He hesitated. Once we open this, there's no turning back, Olivia warned. Marcus nodded. I think that was true the moment we left Oyster Creek. He inserted the key. The roots twitched violently. The whispers behind them grew louder. The missing people had followed. They now lined the tunnel behind them, watching with hollow eyes. Marcus turned the key. The door opened. Behind it was silence. No tunnel, no flame, just an empty chamber carved in roots, and in its center, a pedestal, holding what looked like a small black seed, floating slightly above the surface. Marcus stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the seed cracked open, and the visions began. He saw the world before time, a lattice of realities overlapping like spiderwebs. In one, the oceans floated in the sky. In another, language was soundless. And at the center of all things was a tree, the first tree. Its branches reached into every reality. And somewhere along the way, one branch was corrupted, infected with hunger, with memory, with the desire to be more than what was allowed. That corruption was cast out, sealed within this world, planted like a cancer, the Devil's Tree. And now, Marcus had opened its root line again. Olivia screamed. Marcus turned. The seed had latched onto his palm, sending black veins up his arm. He stumbled back, clutching his wrist. Outside, the whispering had turned to screaming. The tunnel trembled. Then Lenora appeared, her form glitching in and out, caught between dimensions. You've done it, she said, voice reverberating like static. The next breach has begun. What happens now? Marcus asked, the blackness spreading across his chest. Lenora's eyes dimmed. Now you change. You carry the seed. The door cannot stay open forever, but you can walk between them. She looked at Olivia. Protect him, because when the root line reaches its end, they will try to reclaim it. A thunderous snap echoed above them. The tree was falling. The chamber imploded with noise. Light consumed everything. Marcus and Olivia woke at dawn. They were lying on a perfectly flat field. No tree, no hole, no missing people, just wind and sky. But Marcus's hand now bore a spiral mark, and in his chest, something pulsed. He heard a whisper, no louder than a breath. The next door waits in the silence beneath the church. Let's move on to part 6 of the story. The room that watches. The whisper still lingered. The next door waits in the silence beneath the church. For days, Marcus couldn't sleep. The mark on his hand, spiraling like roots or ripples, throbbed with heat every sunset. He could feel something shifting beneath his skin, something listening through him. Olivia had tried to keep them moving, tried to make sense of the fragments. The mirror, the key, the vault, the black seed. But now their destination was clear. Old Bergen Church. Standing since the 1600s, it was the oldest continuous congregation in New Jersey. Its cemetery bore names long erased by time, and its steeple had withstood storms, wars, and whispers. But beneath it, under the floorboards and sermons, there was a room. One no one entered, one no one spoke about. They arrived at twilight, as always. The church loomed on a hill like a warning. Ivy choked its stone foundation. The bell tower stood silent, cracked in 3 places. Despite the hour, no lights glowed from within, no sound of hymns, no birds, and yet the front doors were unlocked. Inside, pews sat crooked and rotting. The scent of mildew and dust filled the stale air. Faint stained glass cast fractured light across the floorboards. Olivia ran a hand along the warped walls. "Something's wrong with the acoustics," she whispered. "It's too quiet." She was right. Even their footsteps felt dampened, like walking on memories. Marcus paused at the altar. The mark on his palm now glowed faintly in the gloom. He held it out like a compass, and it pulsed toward a section of the back wall. There, behind an old pulpit, was a narrow stairwell, nearly hidden, a path downward. Olivia flicked on her flashlight. How did no one notice this? "They did," Marcus said. "They just chose not to." The air grew colder as they descended. Cobwebs thickened. Stone gave way to clay, then old brick. They passed doors sealed with wax. Mirrors turned to face the wall. Strange chalk symbols long since smeared. At the bottom, they found it. A room. Heavy wooden door. Bolted shut. Iron lock rusted but intact. On the surface, carved deeply, was a single phrase. "Do not unlock what watches." Marcus stared. The key, the same one from Devil's Tree, began to hum again. He looked at Olivia. "It's the same door, or maybe another echo of it." "You're not the same, Marcus." He didn't answer, just slid the key into the lock. The door creaked open, and the world changed. The room inside was wrong. It didn't match the architecture of the church. Its walls were too smooth, the ceiling too high. There were no shadows, just a pale, sourceless light that made everything look flat and bleached. In the center stood a chair, and in that chair, facing the corner, sat a figure. Still, unmoving. Olivia stepped in cautiously. "Is he alive?" Marcus said nothing. His gaze was locked on the walls. They were covered in writing. Hundreds of lines scrawled in different hands. Some in English, some in Latin. Some looked burned into the surface, others scratched deep. And one line repeated more than the rest. It sees through mirrors. Olivia reached for the figure in the chair. The moment her fingers brushed its shoulder, it collapsed, as if hollow. Just skin and bones. Empty. And then the whispering returned. But not from behind. From inside the walls. A low chant building, layered in many voices. Male. Female. Young. Ageless. As if the room was echoing every soul that had ever stood there. Marcus turned toward the far wall. A mirror had been hidden behind a sheet. Dust covered. Cracked at the center. He reached out. As his fingers brushed the glass, the spiral on his hand lit up, and the mirror rippled. Reflected in it was not their world, but another room. Almost identical, except the chair was empty, and someone was watching from the corner. A face, pale and eyeless, staring directly at him. The moment their gazes met, the mirror shattered. Olivia screamed. The light blinked out. Everything went black. When they awoke, they were back in the pews of the church, but the world had changed. The stained glass now showed images that hadn't been there before. Twisted trees, broken clocks, a hand reaching toward a spiral. Outside it was still night, but the stars were wrong. Marcus stood slowly. His body felt heavy, as though something had taken root in his bones. Olivia clutched his arm. "Something followed us back," she whispered. He nodded. Not followed. Watched. He turned toward the altar, where the cracked mirror shard now floated above the old Bible. Reflected in its surface was not their reflection, but another version of them, older, gaunt, with black eyes. And behind them, the door was open. Let's move on to part 7 of the story, The Watchers of the Fort. The wind off the river carried the smell of salt and rust. Marcus stood at the edge of the Delaware Bay, eyes fixed on the silhouette of Fort Mott in the distance. The fortress, once used to protect the coastline during the Spanish-American War, now lay in ruins. Ivy crept across its stone ramparts, and the iron cannons stood silent, pointed at a sea long forgotten. But something still guarded it. Something waited. Olivia pulled her coat tighter. "We shouldn't be here." "I know," Marcus said, "but the whisper said this is where the next answer lies. Find the sailors who never left." That was the message they had both heard, spoken not in words, but in that half-dreaming state just before waking. So they crossed the cracked concrete path, past rusted fences and faded signs, warning visitors to stay out after dark. The sun was setting behind them. The fort would greet them in shadow. As they passed through the main gate, the air turned unnaturally still. No birds, no wind, only the sound of their own breathing, and something else. Footsteps, marching, rhythmic, echoing, but there was no one there. They followed the sound toward the old barracks, where rows of decaying cots stood like tombstones. The air smelled of mildew and wet rope. The light from Olivia's flashlight flickered. "I don't like this," she whispered. Marcus didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the far wall. A mural, faded with age, depicting sailors loading cannons. But now, their eyes had been scratched out, and symbols had been painted over them in red chalk. One symbol stood out, a spiral inside an anchor, the same spiral that now burned faintly on Marcus's palm. Suddenly, a voice echoed down the corridor. Low, guttural, stand post, until relieved. They turned. A figure stood at the end of the hall, tall, dressed in a tattered naval coat, face obscured by shadow, and then it vanished. They moved deeper into the fort. Each chamber was colder than the last. Strange patterns appeared in the dust at their feet, boot prints that began and ended in impossible places. Every now and then, they heard the sea pounding against the walls, even though they were nowhere near the waterline. Then Olivia saw the door, heavy, iron-plated, unmarked, just like the one in the church, just like the one beneath the tree. She touched it. It was warm. Marcus pulled out the blackened key. Same lock. He inserted it. This time, it didn't click. It screamed. A high-pitched metallic shriek that echoed through the stone, like something alive being torn open. The door burst inward. Inside was a circular chamber with a domed ceiling. Hanging from the center was a lantern, swinging slightly, though no wind stirred it. And lining the walls, 12 naval coats, perfectly arranged. But no bodies, only shadows inside them. As Olivia stepped forward, the lantern flared, and the coats stood up. The shadows turned toward them. Marcus felt the mark on his hand ignite. The spiral was now rotating faintly, as if reacting to their presence. Then the shadows spoke in unison. No leave, no shore, no end. Their voices weren't angry, just tired, worn thin by centuries of waiting. One of them stepped forward, coat fluttering though no breeze passed. The captain waits. Marcus's eyes widened. The captain. The shade nodded. He guards the gate beneath the tide. Olivia whispered, "The sea's under the sea?" Suddenly, the chamber trembled. Water began seeping through the cracks in the walls, salty and ice-cold. The shadows didn't move. They simply stared. As the water rose to their knees, the lantern fell, and in its light, for 1 second, Marcus saw their faces. Hollow eyes, mouths sewn shut with seaweed. And behind them, barely visible in the rippling surface of the flooding floor, stood a man in a naval officer's coat, his face featureless. A black spiral burned across his chest. The captain. The figure raised a rusted sextant and pointed to Marcus. You opened the doors, and then the room went dark. When they woke, they were outside. The sun had just risen. The porch stood silent, untouched, as if they'd never entered. But something had changed. On the shore, near where they parked, was a naval coat, soaked in brine. Inside its pocket, they found an old, barnacle-encrusted compass. Its needle didn't point north. It pointed out to sea. And when Marcus held it, the spiral on his palm aligned perfectly with the needle's direction. He knew where they had to go next. Far across the waves, the next gate waited, beneath the tide, where the captain stands watch. Let's get to part 8 of the story. The white silence on King's Highway. The night air on King's Highway was thick with fog, muffling the stars and blanketing the historic road in a silvery hush. Trees arched overhead like skeletal fingers, their limbs twitching in the windless dark. Headlights flickered across cracked pavement, swallowed almost immediately by the dense mist. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. Olivia sat beside him, staring silently out the window. Neither spoke. They both heard it. Not the wind, not the engine, the sound beneath it all. Breathing, faint, feminine, as if someone sat behind them. Marcus didn't turn around. They had followed the compass from Fort Mott until it stopped turning, dead center on King's Highway, an old colonial road where travelers once vanished, and where a woman in white was said to walk the shoulders of the road, seeking a ride she never received. The same woman who, according to legend, caused cars to crash when they tried to stop. Marcus pulled the car over. "What are you doing?" Olivia asked, her voice low. "She wants us to stop." "No," Olivia whispered. "She wants us to look." They stepped out into the fog. The road was utterly silent, but then they saw her, standing in the center of the highway. Tall, pale, draped in a white dress that flowed in the air like water, even though no wind stirred. Her back was turned, hair black and loose, reaching the middle of her spine. She didn't move. Marcus took a step forward. Olivia grabbed his wrist. "You know what happens. She turns, and it's over. I think she has something for us." The woman lifted her hand and pointed down the road. No motion, just that gesture, pointing toward something unseen. Then she began to walk, bare feet silent on asphalt, vanishing into the mist with each step. They followed. The fog grew denser. Time lost meaning. They passed abandoned gas stations, shuttered colonial homes, and street signs with letters twisted backward. It felt like the road was folding around them. Then Olivia stopped. A mirror stood in the middle of the road, full length, ornate. The frame was black and silver, etched with ivy and the faint shape of a spiral. Marcus stared at it, then at his palm. The spiral was glowing again. He stepped in front of the mirror. In the reflection, he saw himself and Olivia behind him, but also her. The woman in white stood beside him in the reflection, even though she wasn't there in the road. He turned, empty. In the mirror, she raised her face. Her eyes were gone, just white light. Her mouth moved, but the voice came from inside Marcus's head. "You open the path, but not all must walk it." Then her mouth tore open wider than it should have, as if unhinged. A scream began, but not in sound. In memory, Marcus saw flashes, other gates, other times, a war-torn ship, a tree in flames, children laughing in reverse, a man dissolving into symbols, and something else. A road beneath this one, a copy, where the rules were reversed. He fell to his knees. The scream ended, the mirror cracked, and the reflection of the woman disappeared. Olivia knelt beside him. "You saw it too, didn't you?" He nodded. The copy wrote, "Underneath this one. She's walking it all the time. Over and over. She's trapped." What did she mean? Not all must walk it. Marcus stood. "She's warning us. Not everything we follow leads forward. Some paths are closed. Some are meant to trap us." They turned to leave, but the road behind them was gone. Only trees now, thick and black, and the air was heavy with salt and smoke. Then they heard the engine. A car, their car, driving by itself, down the highway ahead of them. They ran after it. When they reached the shoulder, the car had stopped. Engine off. Door open. Inside, on the passenger seat, was a wedding veil, wet with dew. Marcus picked it up. Beneath it was a note, written in elegant cursive. She died on this road the night before her wedding. Each year, she walks it again, trying to reach the chapel that never came. Don't follow her path, but take her veil. It's the next key. He folded the veil carefully and placed it into his backpack. As they turned back to the highway, the fog began to thin. Light was rising on the horizon, but they both knew the road ahead wouldn't be clear. King's Highway had left its mark, and from this point forward, the paths they walked might not all be theirs to choose. Let's get to part 9 of the story. Echoes behind the walls. Trenton State Prison. They arrived in Trenton just before dusk. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of rust and something fouler beneath it. Forgotten time. The prison loomed like a broken cathedral. High walls of dark stone wrapped in ivy. Windows long shattered. The gate hung slightly ajar, as if someone, or something, had entered before them and never left. Marcus checked the veil in his backpack. Still damp. Still cold. The spiral on his palm had faded since the King's Highway encounter, but it pulsed faintly now, reacting to the place. They say this prison never went silent, Olivia whispered. Even after the last guard walked out, even after the lights were cut, screams still echo through the cells. Some say they're echoes of old tortures. Others believe the prisoners were never really gone, and some think something came in after they were gone. The main corridor greeted them with rot and silence. Olivia's flashlight flickered. Marcus stepped ahead. Concrete peeled under his boots. Bar doors lined both sides, cells with rusted bunks, and words scratched into the walls in languages neither of them could read. At cell 43, they stopped. It was open. Inside, a single word carved over and over on the walls, hollow. And then, a scream. Not human, not animal. It started like a howl and ended like a gurgled sob. It bounced off the walls like light in a shattered mirror. Olivia backed up. That came from down below. Marcus nodded. Solitary. They found the stairwell hidden behind a fallen security gate. It led to the sublevels, D block, reserved for the worst inmates. Or maybe the most forgotten. The air grew colder. Their breath fogged. Another scream ripped through the dark, closer now. But it wasn't the scream that stopped them. It was the whisper. Not from ahead, from behind. Don't let them hear you breathing. Marcus turned, light sweeping the corridor. No one there, but now they saw it. Scratches on the walls, not random. Symbols. The same spiral as the one on Marcus's palm. And beside it, a door painted red. Not rust. Paint. The only door down here that wasn't open. The red door groaned when pushed. Inside, the room was small, windowless, and stank of metal and rot. In the center was a chair. Straps hung loose. Beneath it, a drain. Above, a speaker embedded in the wall. Old. Dead. Then it clicked on. He confessed, didn't he? Didn't he? The voice was warped, as if run backward. Marcus stepped forward. What is this room? A panel on the far wall flickered. A screen, long dead, now stuttered to life. Footage, black and white, static. It showed a man strapped to the chair, sweating, screaming. No one else visible in the room, but the door was open behind him. A shape stood there, watching, tall, thin, unmoving, and then the feed cut out. Olivia stepped back. This place isn't just haunted, it's active. Something's using the echoes, replaying them. Marcus nodded slowly, like a reel stuck on repeat. A loop, but why show us that? A hum began, low and vibrating through the walls. Suddenly, every cell door down the hall slammed shut in unison, and from behind each one, voices began whispering. Not English, not any language they knew. Then, footsteps, fast, coming toward them. They ran. They didn't stop until they reached the chapel. Yes, Trenton Prison had a chapel once, but now the altar was overturned, and the stained glass windows showed things they couldn't name. Figures with hands for faces, a staircase spiraling into an eye, a tree with veins instead of roots, and on the wall, a phrase scrawled in blood-colored paint. They scream because they remember. Olivia whispered, "What do they remember?" Marcus closed his eyes. He felt it now, deep in his spine. Not fear, recognition. They remember before this place was built. They returned to the main hallway. The spiral on Marcus's palm began to glow again. He pressed it against one of the wall symbols. The wall opened. A hidden cell. Inside, a journal. Tattered. Bound in what looked like. No. He didn't want to know. He opened it. Inside were drawings, maps of layered places. A prison beneath the prison. A circle of doors. And in the center, a spiral drawn in charcoal so thick it smudged the page. Below it, a name. Penumbra. Then the journal burst into flame in Marcus's hands. They dropped it, stomping the embers. Too late. From the hallway, the screams began again. All of them. At once, they ran to the front gate, breath ragged, lungs aching. As they crossed the threshold, the screams stopped instantly. The night outside was silent again, but behind them, the prison was lit from within. Every window now glowed with a pale yellow light, and in each one, a shadow watched. Back at the car, Marcus reached into the backpack. The veil was now bone dry, but inside the folds, something new had appeared. A key. Old. Iron. With a spiral carved into the head. They exchanged a glance. This was no ordinary haunting. Each place they visited left a piece of a larger structure. A puzzle of places that whispered, screamed, and bled memory. Trenton wasn't a destination. It was a message. A warning. When you hear them scream, it means they've seen what's coming. And now Marcus and Olivia had heard it too. Let's get to part 10 of the story. Curtain Call. The Haunting of Palace Theater, Newark. The Palace Theater stood like a forgotten monarch in downtown Newark. Its grand marquee long darkened, its golden trim dulled by decades of grime. Yet even in silence, the place breathed. Locals said you could hear music playing faintly at midnight, as if the curtains were still rising for an audience that no longer existed. Marcus and Olivia arrived just as the sun slipped behind the skyline, leaving the street bathed in pale amber. The spiral on Marcus's palm itched again, hotter than before. A bad sign, but they were used to that now. "This one's different," Olivia murmured, staring up at the weathered sign. Palace. Most of the letters missing, the rest flickering dimly. Not angry like Trenton, not lost like King's Highway. This place remembers performance. They stepped through the side entrance. Broken lock, no security. A heavy smell of velvet rot and old smoke greeted them. Inside, the silence wasn't empty. It pulsed. The foyer, once opulent, was a skeleton of what it had been. Torn carpet, dust-covered chandeliers, ticket booths with glass cracked like spiderwebs. Olivia shivered as the door creaked shut behind them. "Do you hear that?" she asked. At first, Marcus didn't. Then it came, softer than a whisper, but rhythmic. Tap, 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 like heels on stage wood. They followed the sound through a hallway of forgotten dressing rooms. Each door bore a name etched in fading gold paint. Gloria Vane, Harold Murray, the Phantasm Boys. But the rooms were all empty, mirrors shattered, vanity lights flickering without power. In one room, they found a red feather boa coiled on the floor like a snake. Olivia reached for it. It moved. She recoiled, heart pounding, but the boa lay still. Just fabric. They pressed on. The main auditorium opened before them like a cathedral. Rows of red velvet seats facing a grand, crumbling stage. Gold trim still clung to the balconies. Ornate angels frozen mid-flight. On the stage, the curtain stirred, but there was no draft. The air grew cold. Then came the applause, soft, scattered clapping from the darkness. Marcus turned sharply. The seats were empty, but the sound continued. And then a laugh. High breathy, feminine, followed by a sob. Olivia gripped his arm. Something's performing. A soft hum began from the stage, a melody from a time long past. They stepped closer. The spotlight clicked on by itself, and in its circle of light stood a woman in white, back turned, hair pinned in old Hollywood style. Her dress shimmered faintly. Then she sang. but the sound was wrong, too slow, warped like a record melting in heat. Each note sent needles up Marcus's spine. Then she stopped and turned. Her face was not a face, not anymore. Just a blank, flesh-colored mask, like someone had erased her features. Still, she looked at them and pointed to the wings of the stage. Then she vanished. The spotlight snapped off. Darkness swallowed the room. A new sound began rattling from beneath the stage. They descended into the understage maintenance tunnels, where props once lived and stagehands whispered. Here the sound was louder. Thump, drag, thump. The spiral on Marcus's hand flared. They passed forgotten props. A fake guillotine, a cracked mannequin with glass eyes, a trunk labeled ACT-3. Then they found it. A room with walls lined in mirrors. But none of the mirrors showed their reflections. Instead, each reflected a different scene, moments of the past. In one, the woman in white bowed to thunderous applause. In another, she argued with a man in a director's chair. He slapped her. In a third, she was alone in the dressing room, holding a razor. Then the mirror shattered from within. The shards flew outward, one slicing Olivia's cheek. But her cut didn't bleed. Instead, the wound filled with light, like her skin had opened into something deeper. "Marcus," she gasped. "Something's trying to pull through me." He grabbed her hand. "Focus. Anchor yourself." Behind them, the applause rose again, but now it was mocking. Then the sobbing returned louder. Closer. They turned. She was back. Only now she floated, feet inches above the ground, her face still blank, but her dress soaked in something dark. She opened her mouth, impossibly wide, and screamed. The sound wasn't sound. It was memory, a scream of betrayal, of endings rewritten. Every mirror exploded. Marcus threw the veil from his pack, now cold again, and it landed across one of the cracked frames. The scream stopped. The woman froze, and then whispered, "He never let me finish the final act." She looked at Olivia, and for a moment, only a moment, her face reformed. Beautiful, terrified. Then the lights above the stage burst one by one, in rhythm, until the whole theater fell back into darkness. When they emerged, the marquee lit itself. Tonight, Gloria Vane, the final curtain call. They didn't speak until they reached the car. Marcus turned the veil over. Another object had appeared within the folds. A theater mask, half comedy, half tragedy. Etched on the inside, a new spiral, and beneath it, a single word. Act 4. "She's not just a ghost," Olivia said, voice shaking. "She's part of the story now." Marcus nodded. "And this place, it's not just haunted. It's a rehearsal." "A rehearsal for what?" He didn't answer, but far behind them, the Palace Theater's lights blinked in silent applause.